Hello and welcome back to another episode of From the Field. I'm your host Casey Orr, based in Wellington, New Zealand, and we're going to be covering an amazing topic today, which is unpacking your AWS account, and with the amazing pop culture reference as well. Dude, where's my instance? Because we've all lost things within the vastness of our AWS environments and accounts and everything like that. So, Donald, why don't you give yourself a quick introduction and then also answer this one question I ask all my guests now is what was the first programming language you learned and what was the first major project you worked on?
My name is Donald Gordon. I work for a company called Cohen, who are an AWS Advanced Tier partner with practices across DevOps, development, data, and managed services. I do both sort of DevOps and development. I started early. My first programming language was BASIC on a ZX Spectrum, which was a computer that you plugged into your TV and saved programs onto it with a cassette tape. And I didn't have any games with it, so I was forced to learn to program, which is all the manual told you how to do. And here I am today. So that's my first programming language. I've been doing the IT thing for quite a while, therefore. My first major project probably depends on how you count major as major. I can either talk about a summer job integrating voice over IP with process control systems, or my first major job, which was a Java implementation developed by a Wellington company, in fact, which was used for mobile phones, mostly in the United States. And we had a bunch of DevOps within that because we could translate Java to mobile phones, and also we had a software as a service compiler in the late 2000s, which was quite neat. So, yeah.
So you're definitely showing your age there.
Yeah.
I'm not
J2ME.
Just say you're experienced, okay? It's fine.
Yeah.
So why are we covering off this topic today?
So TF Explorer came about when I was doing discovery with a customer last year, and they had a fairly large Amazon installation. They've been on Amazon almost all the time. Amazon's been there, I think. They've got stuff across a multitude of regions and a multitude of accounts, and some of it's legacy and some of it's less legacy. But playing that game of trying to understand things as coming from an outsider, and also playing the "Hey, dude, where's my instance?" game was interesting. And I developed in a previous role, I had developed a log analysis tool that used SQLite as an in-memory database to run some quick queries against streaming data as it came in. I thought, hey, there's a tool that will take Amazon infrastructure and chuck it into Terraform state files. I can parse those. I can chuck it into a SQLite in-memory database, and then SQLite will give me a query language. I don't have to. I just have to put a little bit of glue in the middle. I can make something little and hacky, and then it got extended a bit over time as I got it to do more. And I'm still using it today, and some of my colleagues are doing that too.
So it really covers that niche as like a consultant where you're going into these extremely complex accounts, where you have very little knowledge and a lot of the time, um, out of date architecture diagrams because a lot, and
Yeah, it's
then
not just a consultant. Even in a product company, when you come in, sometimes you find everything is neat and orderly, and sometimes it's not. And even if it is neat and orderly, still finding stuff can be tricky. I mean,
and
okay, I know we've got a production account, but which one hosts the Route 53 zone for our main domain name as opposed to which app?
and we already got a question that is like, is this similar to Steam app? Yeah, Steam app, which I wouldn't know. So one of the things that I was also going to point out is that there are other approaches to skinning this cat as well, so to speak. Is where you have like other solutions out there, like Lucidchart, for example, and a couple other providers that will scan your environment and then build out a visual representation of the environment, um, to varying degrees of success, obviously. And that's so you provided a link, streampipe.io. And those can be a great place to start as well. But I find that you have to organize them a lot of the time yourself. And yes, actually, it is quite similar to that steam pipe. I don't know, Donald, if you can actually have gone there, but it is similar to that. But there is a little bit more flexibility because it is a little bit more custom. But yes, it's very similar to that, and that's actually quite interesting.
Oh, that's good to know. There's an existing tool out there. The other thing that it does, actually, that's quite helpful is it can take your VPC flow logs and import them into the structure. So I think that basically I want to be able to do SQL joins across my infrastructure. I can write SQL queries, and I wanted to be able to join against all these things. And you'll see later on some examples of the sort of queries we can write, but they let you say, you know, connect your EC2, join against, say, EC2 instances and flow logs and security groups or something like that to answer a more complicated query. Um, I don't know if
And
Steam.
also, yeah, and also this is the great thing about IT and why it's also so much fun doing this type of job is because we kind of put this out there and then other people around the world are like, oh, have you seen this tool? Have you tried this tool? And like it's really that coming together of all of those ideas, that that helps you broaden it around awareness because now I know about that tool and I can actually go and share that around as well. So why don't we jump into it quickly so we can actually describe what you've done, Donald, and then we can actually have a more apt comparison.
Sure.
So I'll bring up your slides here.
So I'll show you this is the rough, I'll show you the architecture diagram. Oh, so we're in GitHub. We're up here, github.com/conedata/tf explorer. It's pretty simple. This was something written for a particular use that's gone on, been extended a bit more. This is the architecture it uses. There's a README file and there are instructions to follow. If you want to sort of see how this works, is that we take our Amazon resources and Terraform is an existing tool that will transform to Terraform state files. And then inside TF Explorer, we transform them to SQL tables and chuck them in an in-memory database. And at the same time, we can pull down our AWS flow logs, transform them into SQL files. We've got a flow pass tool that is part of the TF Explorer repo. And then when you run TF Explorer itself, it can pull that SQLite file in. And it can also pull in other YAML files and JSON files to dump them in tables if you need to as well. So I think I did a JSON file that gave names to all the account IDs so that I could get a more useful idea of what an account number was. And then it all gets chucked together in the SQLite in-memory database, and then you can write commands like select star from AWS instance. And it's got a few helper extra SQL functions as well, so it can do some maths around IP addresses for you. It can, there's a few other clever tricks it can do, and even produce markdown output if you want to paste the output into documentation. And I have done that for our customer who just need an overview of all their VPCs.
And obviously, because this is just a SQLite, it's just a relational database, this could be stored in Amazon Athena S3, for example. If you had some type of compliance on top of it, that meant that you couldn't like export this data outside of the AWS environment.
Oh yeah, you could. I mean, you could run this entirely within the AWS environment if you had to. And yeah, Athena would have been another option. I could have, I suppose, rather than transform this into SQLite stuff, I could have transformed it to Athena tables. Would have been another option. I tended to pick up the last tool I used to software development, and the last tool I used before this was Python, so therefore it's Python.
Fair enough. Do you want to jump into like the demo side of things, like just so
Sure.
people can actually see what this looks like?
So see what it does. So this is the account we're using. So this is a hastily built setup to give you some examples of the various features it has. We're not doing cross. It can do cross account. You just need to run Terraformer several times to pull stuff out of different accounts. But we've got a region EU West 1 in Ireland, and we've got Sydney here. They've each got some VPCs, and then we've got at least one EC2 instance. We've got some transit gateways connecting them together, and we've got an RDS instance sitting in one of the VPCs in Sydney. So there's a bunch of things we can do to demo this. I'm going to start with a slightly more interactive question, finding what Route 53 zones you have. And this shows you a few of the bits that this tool has. So when we start running, I've got my instance station 2. This is the Terraformer command line. So I'm doing this is a bit Unix shelly because I'm pulling it across several regions. But that just pulls everything in. I hit enter, and that will sit spinning away and import. While I'm doing that, I've also can sync down my flow logs. I've got flow logs in S3 bucket. This won't take very long because this network doesn't have much going on in it. Can still produce a fair few flow logs though.
Going full dev right now, just command line
Yep,
all the
yep.
way.
All the command line. Sorry, I got Linux on a CD from a bookshop in 1997. GUI wasn't much of a thing then. And I've got here's my command line tool so that's part of my flow logs. In the meantime, Terraformer has pulled all its stuff down, and we can run our queries. So this was finding Route 53 zones. So one of the little extra commands it shows you all its tables, because you may not know how the Terraform manages its data. So this just shows you we've got a bunch of tables, and we want a simple one to start with is select start from AWS Route 53 zone. Now that's a fairly messy output. It doesn't fit on my terminal. Let's just choose a few tags. Let's find our ARN and our name. So now we know the ARNs for all our zones that are in the system. Now we can see this is from the field.nz, which is not a real domain name. I didn't register it, but it's a good example.
I think we had that domain. I'm pretty sure we had that domain last year, but for whatever reason, we don't have it anymore.
Now this is a fairly simple example. I've just done a single select. The next one is a bit more complex. So if we go to, so what I'm going to show you is this is when we start doing, not doing joins yet, but we're just doing a list of things. So this is in fact something I did do for a customer fairly recently, which is listing all their VPCs and CIDR blocks. And if you're used to your SQL, you'll see this is we're selecting. There's a few things in here. So we have this AWS account function. So that's something built into TF Explorer. It parses an ARN and takes out the account ID, because I found I had to do that quite a lot when I was doing multi-account. We've also got something to take any field out of your ARN. So in this case, field number 3 is the region. An AWS VPC has a CIDR block on it, and it's got tags. So we're just going to list them all. We're going to dump the tags raw in this query. And IP sortable is another thing I've built into this that just produces a string that sorts nicely for your IP addresses. So if you want to sort them so that 10.36 comes after 10.3 and 10.1, then that works. So I'll show you this query and how we build it up.
And also, so the way as he's doing that, we are getting more and more complex and actually doing a couple use cases that I have seen very commonly cause a lot of extra cost as well. Sorry, Don.
So that's all right. Actually, I'm going to just do, whoops, I've quit out. That's fine. Where's my last VPC query? Is that the one that I used? Here we go. This is the query. We click setting account field. So this is still fairly well. We're not doing joins yet, but that shows us our accounts by region. And we also, because this is SQLite, if you want to do clever things, you can read their SQLite documentation. So we've got one of our tags got a name field. We can say JSON extract. And if I'm getting my syntax right, it's tags, comma, $name. There we go. And that's extracted a field from the JSON, from that JSON tags. So if you've got other tags, if you've got, I know I've got an example later on, we've got like a project ID. You can find all the resources for a project ID by using, it's just plain SQL. You probably know it already. If you're listening to this show, I'd expect you would. So you know the query language already. You just need to read the SQLite docs if you want to find some of their fancy functions. So I'll move on to another one. This is, as I said, yeah, finding EC2 instances by tag. So again, we can use our AWS account extractor. We'll find our ID this time, and again, we can use that JSON extraction aware clause. So you can see here we're going to do JSON extract and say, has the project got the string FTF in it? So it's going to only find AWS instances which have got from the field in their project. Now I think this is probably one I used earlier. So here we go. That's not worked. That's not supposed to happen in your demo.
That's the live demo gods have forsaken you.
It is. Let's restart this. And
so Fortity Co. Someone mentioned SteamPipe because it's quite similar to this. But like obviously we're going for it to see if there's any differences, and it'll be also awesome to see if Jackal can chime in to see where he actually sees if is this similar or like where the differences are, because it seems like he does know that product. So this is what's the name of this? It's
EU West 1. There we go. I've got pulled in Singapore instead of EU West 1. This is what happens when I'm dealing with a customer who's only in AP Southeast too. So what was your question, Casey?
I was like, what's the name of this tool?
It's called TF Explorer. Can you put a link in the show notes or something like that?
Yes, I'll go find it. So it's
public repo, github.com/coandata/tf-explorer. Yeah, I can even show you the URL. There we go, it's here. And I've cleaned it up so it doesn't include any of the weird stuff from my Packy development. Had a few people ask for it.
Cool. Yeah, I'll see if I can find and track down that link.
Sure. So we're going to find out EC2 by tag. Again, this is dependent on that data you get from Terraformer. So if you do something wrong with Terraformer, you just won't get results. Now that I have pulled in the correct region, I'm just having bad luck today. That's not supposed to happen in your demo. And I'm going to give up on filling with this in 1 second once I've read this.
You're having an absolute nightmare of a time with this live demo, aren't you?
I am. That's all right here. Import EU West 1 resources only. That's all right. You saw the query. That's what it does. Good thing I saved the output. So the next one we're going to do is this is the interesting one. Actually, this is the really messy one. So this is, if you're used to your SQL, you see we've got we're doing a join. You'll see. Sorry, this is all text. We've got several clicks on here. So this hash MD that produces markdown output. So this table, that's markdown format. You can paste that in documentation or into your wiki or something like that, or just notes you're taking, which is a lot of note-taking tools seem to use markdown. Find that quite helpful. We get our this is also joining on our flow logs. So we're saying where from clause says flow is one of our tables. This produces the default configuration. You get a source and a destination and a number of bytes. It doesn't even go by. It's really just quite high level flows. You can customize it to have more fields, but for my usage, I found actually just want to know what's talking to what. So this is joining our flow logs against AWS instances, and we can, because again this is SQL, we can do it 2 joins. So we've got our source and our destination. We can say how many bytes. And the other thing, again, we've got full SQL. We can say we want the source to either match the private IP of the instance or its public IP. So if you've got an elastic IP assigned to an instance, you can see, in this case, EC20 is talking to EC21, but they're doing it over the public internet. They're using those elastic IPs. Did we want to be doing that? Is that really intended in our network architecture? We've got transit gateways all over the place. Probably it wasn't. Is this a legacy connection we need to get rid of? Maybe there is a good reason to this for cost optimization, but likely we weren't meaning to talk to ourselves over the public internet. So now we know we're doing it, we can do something about it. I'm going to see how happily my queries are running today. This is, there we go. I've got it back, got my EU West 1 data. There you can see that previous query is going to show us our project with the tags. Now let's do our flow. There we go. There's our flow query. And now this is new because when I did that query, I didn't have the EU zone in here. This is telling us, in fact, you can see this is not an EC2 instance that it's talking to, but it's still within our network. So that's the same query you saw in our slide, but more nicely formatted. So we are choosing from the flow table our source. We're using that JSON extract to pull tags out of one of our AWS instances. We are counting bytes with our flow table. We're doing our join. It's an outer join, so if there's no AWS instance matching the destination, we'll still show something. And then we can see that EU test has been using its private address to talk to that address, but that's not an EC2 instance, so we might want to know what that is. And you will find out in a later query what that is, and we might want to know what's talking to it. So anyway, live demo back on track. Sorry about that, Casey.
You've shown your adaptability. You'll be brought back on.
It's like doing a production deployment that goes wrong.
Those
I
never
don't have too
happen.
many of those these days. So here, in fact, we go. Who's talking to my RDS? Have you ever had something like a database server on your network? You needed to do some work on it, and actually just weren't sure who was using it, what that was. Well, this tool will help you. We're going to find out now. We can find AWS ENI objects have a description with RDS in the name if they are an RDS. So that's how we can find its IP. We can also do a DNS lookup. This tool doesn't do DNS lookups for you. Maybe there's some future work there to do DNS searching. But we're going to go, here's our query. So in fact, if you want to see what the whole object is like, this is a bit messy, but you can do a select star and see we've got a bunch of tables. I often find myself doing a select star. There's also another tools called Coles. I can say Coles AWS network interface, and it will show me all the columns in an AWS network interface. So I can see there's MAC addresses, IDs, private IPs, all that good stuff. But we wanted to find our RDS instance. That's its IP. Now we're going to just do. I could have used a subquery if I really want to be fancy, but let's not go there for this. Let's make our query simpler. So we're going to go and find all the EC2 instances which are talking to that IP. And here we go. In fact, we've got two. So EC2.1, which is, in a default VPC. There's some legacy stuff for you. See, I created some legacy just for you, Casey. Are you having shivers down your spine, or what's the reverse? And
To be honest,
and
like to me, it's the 10.1 SATA range that gives me more anxiety because that's like the standard SATA range that people use in a lot of the on-prem. And that means that when you're trying to do a hybrid connection between on-prem and cloud, that becomes a massive issue. Especially when they both kind of like built up independently and they're like, oh, actually, these both are really handy. We should have them talking to each other. And then they're like, oh, we got IP conflicts.
and that's a really good argument for the sort of the joined up thinking when you're doing IT in your organization in general. If you've got internal IT managing a corporate network and then the people managing your Amazon environment in a separate team and they don't talk to each other, this is exactly the sort of issue you get. It's also, unfortunately, sort of issue you get when you merge organizations and you find that they've got lots of stuff in identical IP ranges. And that's, you can dig your way out of that. You can even dig your way out of without renumbering everything. It's just really painful.
Yeah, the one of an interesting thing is because you can add multiple IP ranges to a VPC now. So there are
Yeah.
creative ways of seeing people shift IPs in while staying in their VPC. These are all
Yeah, you
touching
can add
on
multiple IP
things.
ranges and move things over. And if you've really nicely done things with IAC, sometimes you've got options of, if you're lucky, redeploying your app with a new config. But
Yep.
that involves moving your data around. Sometimes depends on your architecture. Completely depends
Yeah.
on your architecture.
You can tell that we're both consultants. It's depends answer.
It always depends. Have I got any more queries to show you? Is the question. I think that's my queries. Casey,
Nice.
anything else
So
you'd like to ask this EC2 environment, or sorry, this Amazon environment and its multiple regions and all that?
have you done the query that checks if any traffic is going over the internet?
So that was our insane join. This is one of this is so I I've actually got I'm going to have to do this with some customer stuff in the near future because I'm helping them with their infrastructure, and there is a question of what's talking over the internet and does it all need to be. So this is the query that checks if stuff is going over the internet, and you can see that EU test is getting talked to by EC2.1, a small amount of data there, and that's gone over its public IP. You can whittle this down. So this is showing you everything. I'm going to say I don't care about the private IP on one side. I'm just going to match on public IPs. And now we can see, yeah, this is everything that's going between EC2 instances where we're using the public IP on one end.
Nice. Because this is one of the things that I see generally the biggest misconfiguration within AWS is routing, especially when someone has just put in a transit gateway, because obviously you have all the different routing tables interacting with each other. And yeah, and it costs significantly more to communicate to yourself via the internet than through Transit Gateway. So this is why I also specifically point out to this query because this is by far, like running this simple query across your environment
Well, it also tells you
potentially
how
could
much
save you money.
data in this case. You can see from your flow logs, I mean, in this case, this is tiny things, but I've got a customer thing where there's actually gigabytes here that's worth caring about. This isn't worth caring about. Let's do this first cabs off the rank. We've built your transit gateways, we've interconnected them. This is still talking over the internet. Let's change that flow. So it lets you focus down to particular flows and say, we need to fix it all eventually, but here's the big ones to start with.
And the other cool thing that you can do with this is what you can also do in Resource Manager as well, but it's a bit convoluted in my opinion, is where you can actually go list me all of my infrastructure by region, and then you can actually see where you have rogue stuff.
Yeah, so I could write you a query to do that now, actually. We've got, how am I going to do this?
We'll see how good
Let's
your
go
SQL is.
select count star, AWS Aaron field.
While
I think it's
he's
AWS
doing
Aaron
that,
field.
if
Yep,
anyone does have experience of Steam Pipe, do put your experience in the chat because I'm really actually quite
Aaron
interested.
field.
And after this, I'm actually probably going to have a bit of play around with it myself. What you as a audience that have experience with it see the differences or the pros and cons of each solution.
There we go. Just found out how many instances we've got in each region.
Oh, nice.
And again, if we can do, we could do that by account as well if we wanted to. Yeah, I'll give that a proper name.
Yeah, I think knowing the account is much more useful because I have like multiple internal AWS accounts, and as to your point, I have to log into each one to remember where I have a particular project. Excuse me. So knowing where it is upfront with a simple query that I've saved or like for another interface would make my life so much easier.
Yep. But yes,
Cool.
that's again counting by region, and you can do this for things like RDS instances as well. Anything that has got a table for.
Yeah, and having that query that tells you what is talking to your RDS database is also super helpful, especially if you're planning on moving from one database type to another.
Yeah, it's a good. I found this is quite good for those. I think I know what should be happening, and I'm pretty sure. But before we change this infrastructure, what's really talking to this? And that's when you find, oh, someone built something. and they didn't tell you about it, and it's reliant on something else, and hopefully it's not production. But yeah, I've worked in enough places where things like that happen, and sometimes people forget to tell each other.
Hmm. And thank you, Z Jackal, for sharing the repo link for Steam Pipe as well. So it might be something that you also might be interested in having a bit of a gaze at, Donald,
Yeah, no. If it does the job better, I'm happy to use it.
or steal some ideas as well, not steal. What was it? Reimagine some ideas.
It's always a thing when you've built something yourself. It tends to work exactly the way you want to do things, but the disadvantage is you have to maintain it.
Yeah, and also build out all the features. Where something's already built
Yeah.
out, I guess it's we're talking about the whole build versus buy mentality that we have to talk about a lot.
Yeah, and again, this was built to be thrown away. It was a really hacky job that just got a bit more features accreted to it as I started to use it to actually produce reports for the customer. So there's a bunch of extra code I've got sitting off the side of this that's very customer specific, that has queries relating to their infrastructure. So we could say, as we're doing infra work for you, here's the report that says, look, these things have been fixed, these things are nicer. One thing I don't have data in this particular environment I could write the query, but you wouldn't get any results. Is that security groups are in here? So in fact, I don't think I'll produce any results, but I can write you a query. It's showing you what elastic IPs are used in security groups, which is another way of working out, is this going over the internet or not. So you find tables. I say, I don't seem to have elastic IPs in here. I can find out which ones are AWS instances. I might not have imported those with Terraformer. But you can do a Coles AWS security group. We do a select star from AWS security group, and I'll show you all that stuff. And you can scroll through the mess and find out. I think we want. Actually, maybe I won't give you this one because it's really messy. This is all based on cider blocks and not IPs. Oh, there's my house. There's my house's IP. Please don't hack me.
Not the best thing to have streaming or to call out. Um,
That's all right. I think there are DNS records pointing at my house too. So yeah.
nice. Um, So I think what is going to be cool, unless there's any other questions, I might actually bring you on in a month or so time, after we've had a bit of time to play with that Steam pipe, and actually bring you on for like 10 minutes to do a quick review of it based on what you've seen and your experience playing with it. Because I think it's
Sure.
quite cool that we've now been enlightened to a different tool and then see the pros and cons of it. And I think the other one I want to talk about, because while we was preparing for the show, you also had some opinions, let's just say, around API Gateway. Do you have anything that you want to like just quickly talk about that in terms of your experience with dealing with it, in terms of the pros and cons? Because that is one of those services that are used quite often, but there is a few, rough edges, so to speak,
Sure.
that we
I
have to
mean,
watch out for.
the project I've been working on with is replacing an existing third-party API gateway product with Amazon API Gateway, and it's been an interesting project. Part of the issue is that we're trying to replace the engines while the plane is flying. So um, we are we've taken the API gateway, we've just chucked it in front of this existing gateway and had it doing nothing but logging, really. And then we've gradually said, okay, this path is going to skip the existing gateway and go off here. Okay, I'm going to implement authorization, authentication, things like that. In terms of experiences with it, I think some of it, so we're talking about the networking stuff, and it's fine, but it's one of those things you've got to get your head around. So API Gateway connects into your network through a network load balancer if you want to skip going over the public internet for your requests. And that's, again, you can make things work, but it requires to get your head around the fact that it requires everyone in the team to realize that when you've got a URL that says https internal service.customer.com colon 9001, that's actually port 9001 on your network load balancer, not on the service there. So there's a bit of sort of config stuff that people have to get used to. And in general, it's just that the whole mapping an existing product and saying we can do this with API gateway, but we're going to have to write some code. So we've been using CDK for this, and actually CDK has been awesome. I'm relatively new to CDK, and I really enjoy the fact that I can use, as a developer, I can use my sort of object-oriented design experience to build infrastructure, which doesn't seem to work as well with other tools. CDK does that really nicely. And that's also, it just seems to be a really sweet spot for configuring API gateway, in terms of it's got lots of helper methods and things. Yeah, so that was one issue. The other issue that I'm told by someone from Amazon Professional Services is a feature coming in the next however many months, is that a network load balancer can't do
If
DNS
it's a
requests.
feature, if it's a feature coming, don't we won't
Yeah,
talk about that.
not going to tell
But
you about that. But anyway, yeah, there's some stuff around right around if your internal
so
services don't have static IPs
yeah.
that we've done
Anyway,
some workarounds for.
nice. The one thing that I did want to talk about is circle back to your CDK experience and also using the gateway as a proxy. That's a pattern I see a lot, where you kind of stick it in front of the workload and then you use a strangler fig pattern to, as you said, just slowly modernize it and pull it apart piece by piece. Because as you said, replacing the engines while the jet is flying is a pretty difficult job.
Yeah. Well, and you've got, because you've got things like you can put authorizers on per route in the gateway, you get choices to you can say part of that strangulation pattern is that you can say for this thing that we're working on, actually, you can have an authorizer, but the old traffic can go through the old system, so your authorizer doesn't even have to support all the traffic; it just has to support this one thing you've done. And you've also got the option of having multiple API gateways hang off a custom domain. So you could potentially say, everything's going through this big API gateway or this existing product. We're going to jam API gateway in front of it. And we're going to say, you team over here, you really want to build your thing with Amazon API Gateway. You can have one and we can attach it off this big API domain. We can keep the plane flying while you build this and then slot it in. And then gradually you can devolve responsibility from what was once a big monolith sitting in on-prem or EC2 instances into a set of API gateways, still off the same URLs. Your customers consuming this don't know the difference. And even within those individual gateways, you can split traffic off to old systems and new systems and all that sort of stuff. So it does let you slice by URL.
Mm,
And that's without even sticking CloudFront in front of it to be even more clever.
yeah. It's one of those services that there's lots of potential, especially during the migration phase and modernization phase of a project. With that, I think we have gone rather off topic towards the end. So I do thank you again, Donald, for coming here and sharing your experience. And also thank you,
You're welcome,
Rachel,
Casey.
for sharing that product that we didn't know about and also sharing the GitHub repo for it. Do you have if you have any closing questions for Donald, do chuck them in the chat. In the meantime, yeah, as I said, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Casey, and thank you all our watchers.
And I'll give them a little bit longer. So I think next week I will tell everyone what is happening next week once I do this every week. I don't know why I never opened this beforehand. Um, so I just have to stand here.
Well, next week, Casey will be here. I can guarantee
I
that.
definitely will be, yes. I will actually be in Auckland next week. And we are going to be and I haven't confirmed this, but we're going to be talking about cost optimization of your data platform because there's a lot of um, tips and tricks to when you do have a large data platform, especially that you're using it quite heavily to make sure that you can keep those costs down, especially when you're in the formation stages of that project. So that will be very interesting. That is going to be done by Jin. Hopefully, I pronounced his name right. So yeah, if you're interested in that, tune in next week. Other than that, thank you, Donald. Thank you to all of our viewers, and Matiwa, and enjoy your weekend when it comes.